Hey guys, Ron Newcomb here with Mark Maxey with Rolling Pictures. So this is the Indie Coach, and I wanted to take a second just to talk about the coach part of it. And the objective and the goal is what makes me a little different, kind of the differentiating factor on why you would want to listen to this particular podcast is really that coach element. I think a lot of us want to have a mentor. We all desire to kind of have, hey, I think I need a mentor to kind of help me out. And but what I've realized throughout my life, now that I'm getting ready to turn 51, is that what's really impacted me the most are coaches, not really mentors. A mentor is someone that really is trying to go into your life over a long period of time, where a coach does these little micro elements into something, maybe even something really specific to advance your cause as quickly as they can in the briefest amount of time. And you see that again, the biggest analogy, of course, is in sports. And so that's what I grew up playing sports, particularly football. And I can look back over a lot of coaches that made a significant impact in my life. That's why I try to target coaching over mentoring, though both of them admittedly can be synonyms at times. But I'm really trying to have specific elements in these conversations to where one can walk away and really feel like they garnered some information in a very short period of time to make some significant gains in specific areas of the arts. And I've really kind of opened it up to not just filmmaking, though that's the predominant lens that I look through with. It really is about the arts in general. So, writing and games and all kinds of stuff. Any IP development or story driven element is really what I'm about. So today with us, so we have Mark Maxey, who is a producer in the Northern Virginia, DC market and is the founding member of Rolling Pictures. So Mark, let me turn it over to you and kind of tee it up with just to talk a little bit about how you founded and got into Rolling Pictures.
Sure. Yeah. I'm an independent producer, and Rolling Pictures is an independent production company. The company is based in Los Angeles, and we kind of do work all over the world wherever the work is. I happen to live in Northern Virginia, but I think one of the things that I realized early on is that the work is wherever you make it, and it doesn't really matter where you live. I meet a lot of people that think, oh, if I'm not in Los Angeles or I'm not in New York, can I really start a career or have a career in the film industry? And the answer is yes. It really doesn't matter where you are. It's easier to connect with people or network or attend industry events in some towns versus another. But yeah, I started with a production company based on the East Coast, grew it to where we were doing work all over the world. But we were primarily providing services for other people. Someone would show up with a budget and a story, and we'd produce it and film it and edit it and broadcast it or stream it or deliver it on a DVD or whatever it is that they wanted. Um, I did that for almost 20 years. It was a lot of fun. It was very rewarding, but not as creative as making my own feature films. And so when I set up Rolling Pictures, it was a pivot intentionally to just focus on you know feature films and telling the stories that I wanted to tell, not the stories other people wanted to tell.
So kind of going off that note, what got you into wanting to tell stories? Was there something, as a youth that kind of hooked you, be it a movie or a book or something that kind of pulled you into storytelling?
Yeah, I grew up, actually. There was a motion picture studio across the street from where I grew up. My parents were both musicians, and so I grew up in a very artsy kind of environment. Because of the studio being across the street, we got pulled in when they needed, background or child actors or things. They did a lot of industrial and corporate stuff, not Hollywood type films, but in terms of the processing, editing suite, understanding how films are made, understanding sound and lighting and what goes into putting those pieces together. I think I was exposed to that at a young age. That said, I didn't grow up wanting to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a rock star when I was a kid. My first career, if it had gone the way I'd wanted, I'd be Van Halen right now. So I think when my music career, I realized I lacked the talent necessary to actually do that. I kind of fell back to the visual arts and kind of found my way into what I'm doing now, which I love. It's I found my lane, I found what I'm good at, and I love everything about what I do.
Yeah, there's a local musician who's actually toured with a bunch of big bands, and lo and behold, he lives in Manassas, Virginia. So to your point about kind of being able to do it from everywhere, that was certainly one of my questions. That in today's market in 2024, do you need to live in LA? And most people have a feeling like, no, you don't. But you are one of the few people looking from the outside in that I do see really making it work, where you don't really need to live in LA or New York, frankly, to make it work, and you go where the work is and you just make it work. If you were starting Rolling Pictures in 2024, is there anything that you would do differently, or where would you start now? Would it be kind of the same process, or where would you start as a new producer, kind of just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, I set up my company in Los Angeles. I mean, there is value to being where the industry is, and so we are a California corporation with a presence in Burbank, is where our offices are. So, I think I would do the same thing for the same reasons. I mean, I wanted the company to be set up in a place where I would have access to other people and decision makers and just the network that's available there. I choose to live in the East Coast because this is home for me, and I didn't want to move my family to Southern California. Um, but yeah, in terms of starting, having already been involved in production and then having started really in documentary films, I was doing more unscripted stuff before I ever pivoted to narrative feature film. So that was a conscious choice on my part to really, kind of do something different. I'm someone that kind of a lifelong learner. I always like new challenges. I don't want the next 20 years to just be a repeat of the last 20 years. I want to do new things and challenge myself in different ways. One of the things I love about filmmaking is that it's a very collaborative medium.
Yeah,
That's
for
it,
sure.
it takes. I'm not someone who could just work by myself at a desk. I mean, I couldn't be an accountant or an editor or one of those roles where I'm just alone in a room every day doing something. I love the collaborative aspect of bringing together a team of people, and
Yeah,
you'll have 100 or 200 people on a film set on any
yeah,
given day, and even just getting up to that point, it's a creative collaboration between the director and all the heads of departments, and then after production, it's a creative collaboration in post production as you're making all those editorial decisions that really shape the pace and tone and what ultimately ends up on the screen. So just at every phase, it's working together with other people, and that's one of the things that I love. So to your question, find your tribe, find the people that you could collaborate with. Find
yeah.
if you're a producer, find a director of photographer, find a screenwriter, find one of the people that do the things that complement what you want to do. Um, and I think that's the best place to start. If you're a writer, that's ultimately the place to start. Is tell your stories. I'm
Yeah.
not. That's not my gift. I'm not a screenwriter, so I'm a non-writing producer, so I'm always looking for intellectual property I can acquire and develop and package and produce. But yeah, I'm envious of the people, like you. Actually, I mean, you're one of the people that you have this ability to write and create and produce and the business acumen behind putting it all together, which is one of the reasons why I've enjoyed our relationship over the
Yeah.
last many years it's been. So
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I definitely appreciate kind of the variation as well, and the dynamic that we each kind of bring to the table. In 2024, it's hard not to look at the industry and see so much changing, and yet there's so much that hasn't changed. You still need to get out and kind of make the donuts. But how do you see the industry evolving at this particular moment in time? I mean, certainly I can look back over the times that I've been involved when we had VHS tape and then DVD and then Blu-ray. And now, that was a big money maker. And then those things kind of phased out, and then trying to work through, okay, where's the where's the business model now, and streaming and all that. But just in any direction, be it technology or just as a happenstance of having to pivot around budgets, how do you see the industry evolving in 2024?
Yeah, I don't know that I could predict the future, but just looking at the recent past, in a lot of ways, the industry has gotten better for independent filmmakers. 20, 30 years ago, it was much harder for an independent producer to make a film and sell a film and find an audience and
Yeah.
find distribution. And there's so many more paths available today through all the streaming platforms and other ways that people are now absorbing and experiencing content. There's so many more places for a producer and content to go to find an audience that I think that's a real positive thing. On the flip side, there's so many now places where it could go that it's also in some ways kind of devaluing or driving, budgets down in some ways. You
Yeah.
spend 10 or $20 million on a film and have any reasonable confidence you're going to get that back unless you have a big theatrical release or a big streaming partner that's going to back that. So for the lower budget independent films, I think it's got a little more competitive because there's so many choices. A lot of people started making more content.
Yeah.
That's the flip side. When you look at the industry, though, at its core, the different windows that you used to have for the release of a film, it really hasn't changed. You'd have a theatrical window, and then there'd be a premium pay-per-view window through the
Yeah.
cable providers, and then it would go to the SVOD window, the subscriber-based platforms like an HBO or someone like that, and then ultimately it would end up on the subscriber-based or advertiser-based windows, the AVOD windows, which might be equated to a movie finding its way to a broadcast television with
Yeah.
commercials inserted, and then ultimately it finds its way to home video where it's available to consumers to buy in a VHS or a DVD or something. And I think that model still largely exists. The platforms that people are using are different, perhaps, but there's still that theatrical, SVOD, AVOD, home video kind of market. I think those different windows still kind of apply. And then,
Yeah.
so, at its core, I think it's the process is the same. It's just there's a lot more platforms and a lot more players and a lot more opportunities as well as a lot more competition.
Yeah, definitely competition kind of bred into it. I mean, we could look back in the 90s and see the examples that kind of sprung up and survived, like Kevin Smith and Rodriguez and those guys, but they were the anomalies, And film wasn't as cheap either. I mean, it was on film, so you actually had to put out a pretty penny to kind of get it done. It was interesting. I was just seeing that Best Buy took all their physical media off the floor like a month ago or whatever. After Christmas, they took all DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff off their floor, which was just heartbreaking. But then you see other big producers and directors, like I think Guillermo del Toro was one of them, saying that it is now our responsibility to kind of hold on to that media, and it's important for us to retain that, almost like vinyls are today. They're kind of talking about it's our responsibility, and that kind of resonates and feels right a little bit. Like, yeah, you're right. Particularly ones that you love and you want to see stories retained. There is something still to be said about owning that piece of media, which is, again, things change and yet they don't. You still want a piece of that. So with Rolling Pictures, we all want to develop our personal brand. You have Rolling Pictures out there now for some time. Are you focusing on the development of each project that comes your way and the uniqueness of that project, or are you focusing specifically on the brand of Rolling Pictures? And if so, is there like a certain genre that you're trying to stay within, or is it more, again, what it's unique each time that a project is presented to you?
Yeah, I think we look at the merits of each project more than we're not really a genre shop. I know people that all they do is horror or all they do
Yeah.
is fantasy or whatever their niche is. And for us, we're not really defined by a specific genre. I think the things that are common to the stories that we choose to pursue are that they're all kind of compelling character driven stories. We're not making Fast and Furious with a lot of car chases. We're not making Star Wars with a lot of big visual effects. Each of the stories, whether it's a drama or a comedy or political thriller or a romance, are all still at their core very character-driven stories that'll hopefully enable us to attract really talented actors that want to be in these great roles, and then hopefully will resonate with audiences that are looking for for those types of films.
So, that kind of leads into star power. I hear a lot of indies, they don't want to admit perhaps where star power lies today, particularly in the eye of distribution. Does star power still matter in 2024?
I think it depends on what your goals are. So, I mean, if your goal is to have wide distribution, then it certainly helps. If your goal is to raise a lot of money to make your film, having names attached that people recognize certainly helps. But there's a lot of people making a lot of great films that don't have A-list actors in them, and they're still making great films. I couldn't have named a single actor in the movie Parasite before it won the Oscar for Best Picture, but
Yeah.
I didn't make it anything less than a fabulous film. It was an amazing
Right.
film, even though none of those people, in my experience, were household names in the
Yeah.
traditional Hollywood sense. I think you saw that with Nomadland and some of these other films where Frances McDormand maybe but no one else in that film was a Hollywood A-lister. Uh,
Yeah.
and yet it won an Oscar for Best Picture. So I think you could do a lot regardless. But it definitely, in my experience, it helps to have Kevin Bacon in your film, or Katie Holmes in your film, or Dustin Hoffman in your film if you're out trying to raise money or do pre-sales or attract relationships that'll help you get that film made and seen.
Yeah, no, I definitely think I think you're right. It's a good delineation, and bringing up Parasite's a good example. But it's funny. I hear independents trying to play down star power, and yet trying to break through the noise because there is so much content being made. Star power, in my mind at least, is still significant because you're trying to break through the noise. And like you said, if you have Kevin Bacon and there's suddenly people can go, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I know that it's at least going to be at this level, you would think.
And I think the actors want to act. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that we saw during the strikes this past year from the Screen Actors, from SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild is, people like Mark Ruffalo and others out there championing independent films, saying, look, you don't have to, as an actor, you could choose not to just do big studio blockbusters. Go find these independent films that aren't kind of bound to that
Yeah.
Hollywood system. And, there's a lot of great opportunities to work and be part of some really amazing, compelling stories. And so I think as he and others, have realized that and kind of shared that within the acting community, I think you'll find increasingly, that there are more actors, even well-established, well-known actors, willing to take a chance or take a look at independent films that might have not been something they would have considered, 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. They definitely, actors want to work, they want to act for sure. When you're working on a project or developing a project, do you like to come on board being a part of a project that has already started to be packaged and kind of down the road? Or do you like to come on extremely early in the development process and develop the project, kind of like from day one? What's your kind of preference?
Yeah, I've done both. I prefer to be, to develop it myself or develop it early with my team. I've acquired life rights for stories that haven't been written yet. I've acquired literary rights that we're adapting it into a screenplay, or I've acquired, screenplays where, we could package it and finance it and produce it ourselves from the ground up. I've also joined other people in helping them tell their stories or finish their films, but that's not as rewarding necessarily as the projects that we've developed organically from the ground up ourselves. So, I think my preference is to really be in at the beginning and really shape it into what we believe it could be, and then build the team around it. I mean,
Yeah.
it comes back to this collaborative thing. There's so many talented people out there, from production designers and cinematographers, et cetera. Just when you get in early and you're able to build that team, I think you're much more likely to be happy with the destination you reach. I think in some cases when you're joining someone else's team, you're just there to serve their vision, and it may or may not align with where you would have taken something or how you would have done it. And it's hard to get as excited about those kinds of projects where you're just attaching yourself to someone else's wagon versus, driving it yourself. So
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt about it. Um, what is the process for kind of developing ideas? You said you've already gotten some IP where you've gone out and secured some things, but do you are there books that you look after, or people send you ideas or IP, or you hire a writer to write an original idea, or maybe a kind of a secondary question, a producer brings you something to maybe co-produce? Is that potentially on the table too?
yeah, for speaking for myself, I've done all the above. So, I mean, there are producers that I enjoy working with that have brought projects where we've collaborated on them together. There's books that I've tried to option either successfully or unsuccessfully. I haven't necessarily, been able to get the rights to everything that I've wanted. I've lost out, to some people that are much bigger than me and companies that are much bigger than Rolling Pictures, understandably. And then there are other books or where I was able to secure the rights and adapt into a screenplay. So I've hired writers. I don't have a lot of original ideas. I'm not really hiring people to write stuff I've thought up. I'm really
Right.
hiring people to adapt a story that's come to me, or some kind of rights that I've acquired that need to be adapted into a screenplay. So it's often based on a previous published work or someone else's story idea that then just needs to be developed or refined. Um, but yes, I mean, all the above applies to, to the work that we've done at Rolling Pictures.
When Now that you've been doing this for quite a bit now, what is a good way for um someone like yourself to be approached by someone else to potentially present something to you? Is there a certain kind of format or way, or is email just an inquiry email? What's kind of the best way for somebody to approach somebody like yourself that's been doing it now for a number of years?
Sure. So, I mean, for a variety of reasons, we're one of those companies that won't take unsolicited material. That said, there's a lot of material that comes to us through people that we know. So it's not really unsolicited, and so much so that I have, a couple people that all they do is read scripts and write coverage, because I don't have the time to read everything that ends up on my desk. And so, I tend to leverage our readers to, do the coverage and help me kind of prioritize where to focus. We're a small company, so we're not doing, 10 films a year. We're doing 1 or 2 films a year. So if I,
Yeah.
get 10 screenplays a month, that's 120 things, to read, and I'm going to pick 2 of them, which means 118 of them are just going to end up on the shelf. So finding
Right.
the right two is really important. And so we put a lot of thought and care into trying to make good choices around the types of stories that not only we want to tell, but also that we can tell. There's rights to screenplays that I've acquired that are stories that I love that will probably never get made. Either I don't have the right director or we can't get the right lead actor attached. And so, it's things that I believe would just be amazing films, but for a variety of reasons will probably never come to fruition. So it's not so much just finding the stuff that we like, but it's also what do we like, what could we package, what could we
Yeah.
get financed, and what can we get made. And that's and I have a team of several other people that are creative executives that help and are part of that process. So it's not just me necessarily, but between all of us, we try to find those things that really stand out from the others, and you'll find them. There's a lot of material out there. So
Yeah. Well, how long on average from the moment of like, hey, I'm interested in something, to like you're seeing it on the big screen or you're in distribution? What, just an approximation, how long does that life cycle take?
it's usually 2 to 3 years for me. And that doesn't count the time that a story might have developed before it came to me. So
Yeah.
I did a film with Kira Sedgwick directed, and Kevin Bacon and Alexander Shipp and Kyle Allen all starred in. And, I got involved and we filmed it a couple years ago and it came out last year. So from the time I got involved, it was maybe a 2.5 year. I guess we shot it in 2021. It premiered at Tribeca in 2022, and then it was released in 2023. So I mean that was a 3 year span just from when we were
Yeah.
prepping to when it came out. But even before we got to the point where we were in prep, the screenwriter spent years writing and then developing, and then it had been optioned by someone and it didn't go through, and then Kira Sedgwick found it and she got it, and then did her packaging before I even got involved. So I mean, the period of time I was involved is maybe a 3 year period, but there was another 5 years before that, that the project was kind of coming together. So
Yeah.
from a writer's perspective, it could be 10 years.
It seemed like it takes forever. Yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, though, it's generally, it's a year to shoot and a year to edit and then a year for it to be released. So it's generally a 3 year window is what I would tell people to expect.
Yeah.
From start to finish.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely reasonable. And, I think a lot of people have misperceptions of how quickly they can get something out there, and they forget the process also of that final step, which is distribution. It takes time to get sales and to get it out there and to work the markets and all that. What is a typical day for you? How do you kind of fill your day normally?
Yeah, it's a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, and a lot of reading, and it's budgets and spreadsheets, and I mean it's just it's a mix of, I guess it kind of depends on where we are in the process. So right now I don't have a production underway, and so it's a lot of reading scripts and putting projects on the board and working through budgets and funding and casting and try to align resources to get the next project started. Last year when we had a film in production, I spent 2 months on location in Latvia with one of our films over there that was set in Eastern Europe. And so,
That's cool.
for 2 months, you're out of the country, just focused on, making the day, getting through on within 12 hours, not having to go to a second meal, and,
Yeah.
keeping the wheels on the tracks. So,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The typical producing stuff that you hear about, and you're still trying to make your day. It doesn't matter where you're at in the world.
True.
If a film fights you every step of the way, which is one of my sayings, what are some of the hurdles you've had to overcome while producing?
Yeah, I think you have to be prepared for anything. I mean, you try to plan as best you can to ensure that you don't have union issues. I mean, most of the productions we do are typically all union. So I know people that have tried to do something that was non-union and would end up getting flipped or have their production impacted adversely. So we try to avoid that by just being all union to the extent that we can. Or in the case of the film that we did with Mayim Bialik, she was directing and she's not DGA. So we didn't have anyone in her department that was DGA, but the whole rest of the production was all union. So there are exceptions there. And then you always plan for safety. We've done things where we've had weapons, and as the Rust incident reminded all of us, safety on set is paramount, and so that's always a big factor. I always try to make sure that we feed everybody well, that we have realistic schedules, that we have transportation and cover location, so that if there's a weather event or some other thing, you're not losing time or losing a day, that you could shift and adjust. And we've dealt with rain and storms and power outages and all kinds of obstacles or hurdles. And the thing that we were doing in Latvia, we were dealing with some government regulations and issues that affected our production design, given what we were staging a big outdoor siege with 1,000 extras and military vehicles and people in uniform storming a building, and given its proximity of where we were filming versus some of other hotspots in the world, there were some concerns that were voiced by the local authorities within days of us shooting this big siege that had us scrambling and rethinking our approach to how we were going to
Wow.
accomplish what we needed to accomplish. On one of the films I was involved with, we tragically lost a member of our crew who
Hmm.
passed away in their sleep of completely natural causes, but in the middle of the
Wow.
production, his members of his department went to go wake him up at the crew hotel, and he had sadly passed away.
Oh,
And that led to conversations with everyone from authorities to unions, and obviously it was just a tragedy for the people and the crew that we then had to address and work around and
yeah.
absorb, yet still had to move forward with the production. So it's you never know what's going to come at you. Oftentimes it's just, is the food still hot? Do people get their breaks on time? Are we sticking with our schedule? Are we making our day, staying on
Yeah.
schedule? And do we have the money we need to finish the film? So cost to complete is one of the things I always look at, and you don't ever want to be in a situation where you're scrambling, um, which is often the case in independent films. So.
So true. Yeah, no, I've dealt with a few of those similar items, and yeah, it's funny as a producer, you get into it to tell stories, and ultimately that's what we all want to do. But it has to be kind of at the end of the day, because when you're middle of producing as a producer, you're serving ultimately the greater good. So you're there to do everything non-creative. You're trying to hit the schedule, and like you said, food and vehicles and all those things are at the top of mind as a producer. Where do you see creatives, and then I'll flip it and say Hollywood blowing it? Where do you see creatives blowing it? And then where do you see Hollywood blowing it? There's a lot of things Hollywood does to excellence, but where do you see us creatives blowing it? And where do you see Hollywood blowing it?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer. I think everyone has good intentions when they start something, and sometimes it just isn't executed well. I think there's a lot of missed opportunity. I think in some ways the industry's come a long way. I think in terms of inclusion and more diversity of voices and perspectives that are represented on screen, both on screen and behind the camera. I think we've come a long way. You see that with there was a period of time where there wasn't a single women director involved in any major nominated film, and then all of a sudden you had a
Yeah.
ton of films being done by women directors, and you've seen that with different ethnicities and different other groups of people and perspectives that have perhaps been underrepresented that are now increasingly being better represented. So I think in some ways the ways Hollywood was blowing it, perhaps it's also been exposed and is being corrected. Um, and and I don't know that I've got a good answer other than that, really. I mean, there's a lot of films that have been historic failures, but I still think people went into them with good intentions. And so I'd hate to call someone out and say, well, here's how you screwed up and why. I
Yeah.
think, well, we talked about Rust. I'll use that as an example of the safety thing. I think there were multiple opportunities there where things could have gone differently for that film, and
Yeah.
people just weren't paying attention and weren't focused on doing their job with excellence. And um, you know, uh, there were live bullets on a set that shouldn't have had any live bullets, and
Hmm.
someone looked at a gun and declared it cold and handed it to someone else without actually checking to make sure that that was the case. And I mean, all these other failures that led to those things happening,
Yeah.
tragic consequences for that film, and um, so many of those things were avoidable. So maybe that's an example of where
Yeah.
things kind of fell apart in a devastating way. But um, more often than not, I think people are well intentioned, and they just have failed to plan or prepare, um, and that's what leads to someone perceived to be blowing it. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't like that question.
No, no, exactly. It's
Oh, too
hard
much.
to as a fellow artist and filmmaker to try to Monday morning quarterback, but just from a point of view of trying to not quarterback them, but to try to learn. And Russ is a great example. It's not like we're trying to Monday morning quarterback them. I wasn't there and all that, but the tragedy that resulted in, man, you just wish you could take it back. I'm sure they do. And yeah, what a wake up call for all of us. I mean, certainly for me, I was shortly after that where I was on a set, and, we had weapons and everybody was at a heightened sense of awareness, and thank God, it's like we were rightly so, very heightened about that. And so, yeah, just trying to come from a perspective of trying to learn. What's a thing that made it possible for you to succeed? You know, it's hard in this business, certainly, but is there something that you can kind of point at that you went, you know, that was a good thing that made it possible for you to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the entertainment industry is that if you want to work in this business, um, you just have to decide that you want to do it and then go do it. You know, you don't have to go get a degree. You don't need someone else to validate you. There's no certificate that's needed before you're able to be a filmmaker or be an actor or be a producer or a gaffer or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you just choose to do it and then go do it, and that's the great thing. There's really no barrier to entry now. On what level you're able to do it, is another thing. So you're not going to make a $10 million film, your first film. You might start making a short with no money and your friends, but anyone can do that.
Yeah.
There's a filmmaker I know who made a short film that got into the Cannes Film Festival, and it's a brilliant 13-minute piece set in outer space, and visually it's stunning, and the music is amazing. He shot the whole thing in his apartment with a green screen and his friends, and he and his sister wrote the music themselves, and he cut it together and did the visual effects, and
That's crazy.
it's a phenomenal film. It looks like $100,000 short, and he made it for less than $100. So, it doesn't take a lot of money to be successful. One of my other favorite shorts that I saw, it wasn't mine, and I don't know who made it, but it was two people sitting on a couch, and it was all of 90 seconds. And it was called "It's Not About the Nail." If you Google it, I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. But genius! It was concise and well written and well acted and funny, and the timing was spot on. And it must have cost them nothing. It's two people on a couch, a single setup, but it was so clever and so well done. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think just choose to do it, and then, like I said, find your tribe, find a writer, find a director, find someone that's got lights, find someone with a camera. Do a 48-hour film festival. Get involved with your local,
Yeah.
community, TV station or public access or whatever. There's so many places you could go to connect with other people and then build that network.
Yeah.
I early in my career, I had a mentor who said that his most valuable asset was his Rolodex. I mean, I'm old, so we had Rolodexes back then, but his point was that his network, the people he knew,
Yeah.
was his most valuable business tool.
100%. I
and
agree.
and that always stuck with me. And so I've always tried to engage and participate and join. I'm on the board of Women in Film and Video. I'm on the board of the Producers Guild. I'm a member of the Production Alliance. I got to know the film office where I live. I try to connect with everyone on the crew when I'm on set. I'm present when I'm on set, so that
Yeah.
I'm not one of these guys that sits in an office and just rolls in for the parties. I like to be boots on the ground from the first shot to the last. Really be engaged in part of the process, because that's where you make the connections.
Yeah.
No matter if you're a PA or a producer, be present, get engaged, and the network with people. And then the flip side of that is you have to deliver too. I mean,
Yeah.
show up in time, do your job well, network and ask questions when you need to. But I mean, there's a lot of people that I think come in and think that they're better than this or better than that, or don't take it seriously. And hey, if you don't believe in yourself enough to show up in time, then don't show up at all. And don't treat people poorly because they're a PA or they're an assistant or they're whatever, because that person that's the assistant today may be the creative executive 5 years from now, that's looking at your pitch and deciding whether or not you're gonna get a green light. I mean, it's a very incestuous business, and people work their way up, and so over time, you just want to be good to everybody and really deliver on your promises and your commitments, because your reputation is everything. So
Yeah. It's a big business and big industry, and yet it can be a very small one too. Like you said, the Rolodex, people kind of know other people. So, um, how does one find longevity in this industry, or even specifically, how does one find contentment in this? Because I know so many people, I feel like, are in process. They're not making the film, and they get frustrated that they're not out on location every month. but yet I've found the ones that are successful the most are the ones that find contentment. So how would you say, how does one find longevity in this industry or find contentment?
I think you have to believe in yourself and don't give up. I mean, this is, like so many things, there's so many opportunities where a door is closed or isn't opened, or you get a no before you get a yes. And that's not unique to the film business. That's true for any type of performer or anyone in sales, or anyone in any
Yeah.
business. Open a restaurant, nobody comes, and
Yeah.
so how do you build the connections and the awareness and the visibility to start drawing some attention to yourself? I think that's kind of a universal thing. But yeah, you have to not give up. I mean, believe in yourself. I said earlier, I think that I view myself as a lifelong learner. I've got a bookshelf full of books behind me, and I read every single one, and I would dissect other people's films to try to figure out, all right, well, if I know that there's a beat sheet and a shot list that went into this, let's kind of reverse engineer what
Yeah.
the other person did and try to figure out how they put it together. I do the same with budgets too. If I got a budget for someone else's film, I start looking at what do they spend here, where do they put their money there. Try to keep the dollars on things that are on the screen and not the things that aren't, so that you end up with a better looking film, or a better finished product. I think there's a lot of things you could do. I signed up for Zoom classes and master classes, and I've been a mentor, and I've gotten mentors, and just done everything I can to try to broaden my own experience and my perspectives. And that was even though I'd been in the business with the production company for 20 years, doing commercials or industrials or corporate or news or TV, or documentary films. When I pivoted to doing narrative feature films, it's completely different. I never had to do a pitch deck for a documentary, because we'd go make the documentary. You only had a 5-person crew. You didn't, there was no pitch decks or financing agreements or investor waterfalls for what I had done the previous 20 years. So even, just since starting Rolling Pictures, it's been a constant trying to be a sponge and absorb and learn and connect and grow that network and that understanding and that experience. And I think everyone can do that. So, I like to say that if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. Find really talented people and just
Yeah.
try to learn from them. If you want to direct, start off being a gaffer. I mean, go understand lighting and the language of what goes into that, and you'll be a better director because you're able to talk with your departments with a little more understanding and authority than someone who just focused on directing and didn't kind of work their way up through that. And I think there's so many other examples where you know you just have to start and keep working your way up and building to get to where you want to go. No one starts off you know being Scorsese. No one starts off just going out and I don't know. One of the most successful producers in Hollywood, um, actually the highest grossing producer in Hollywood, whose films have grossed billions of dollars, I think was turned down the first several times he applied to USC Film School. He desperately wanted to go to USC, and couldn't get in. And today he's the highest grossing producer in Hollywood.
Right. Yeah.
So you can't give up. You got to believe in yourself and just keep going after your dreams. So
No, you definitely got to persevere for sure. What or who are you a fan of, and who's doing it right? Who's doing filmmaking right now?
oh gosh, I think that's a ton of people. I mean, I like Mark Ruffalo. He's one he's been part of the big studio blockbuster
Yeah.
superhero films with his Amazon or whatever Avengers.
Yep. Yep.
That's not my genre. So, but I know he's part of that world. But he's
Yep.
also part of this fiercely independent world that's just telling some really amazing stories with some very modest budgets in very unique and compelling ways. And so I think he's someone that I really respect and appreciate. What he's kind of brought. But there's 100 other names I could give you. I mean, there's just so many people I admire and respect who are doing incredible things and telling some amazing stories. So I think
Yeah.
that's a
I just,
answer.
I just saw a Mark film on Netflix, where he played a dad over in occupied World War II kind of deal. Really well done. I do like his diversity, and I think you're right. He's one where he can go to the big screen and be in Avengers and play Hulk, and then you'll catch him in a little indie film, and he's just as powerful. And the dude can act, and
Yeah.
actors like to act, and so he's out there working, which I love to see.
Yeah.
Where can people find you and support what you're doing?
Oh, well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, rollingpictures.com is our website. So if you go there, you could see, links to the films that we've done that are available, and, news about the things that are in the works for what's not. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm out there. So people could connect with me through social media networks, Instagram or LinkedIn or what have you, or just Rolling Pictures. We're a small independent company, so I mean we're certainly accessible and not, we're not all that, but we also, I think, are a good example of how, regardless of where you live or who you are or what kind of
Yep.
budget you work in, if you just keep moving forward and doing the work, you could find your path and forge a career in this industry and do something that you love. I have two sons, and I tell them follow the fun. Doesn't matter what you want to do, follow the fun, because if you love what you do, then it's not work. I can't wait to get up in the morning every day when I go to work. I'm just doing what I love, and it's hard sometimes to unplug and stop. I just want to work all the time because I love what I do. And
Yeah.
I've been in edit sessions where it's midnight or 1 in the morning, and the editor and I are finally like, we've got to go home, but we hate to tear ourselves away. Or it's
Yeah.
a Friday night, and you hate to lose 2 days and have to come back on a Monday.
Yeah.
But just because you're so into the zone and into the moment and into the creative of what's happening. So I mean, I think that's my advice: is follow the fun, do what you love, and you'll love what you do, and that makes for a happy life. Uh,
Yeah. No, I definitely love that. Um, well, I definitely appreciate our discussion, and thanks so much, Mark, for that and your experience that you shared with us, so that we can all kind of take away what you've done, work it through in our own head, apply it to our own lives, and make it work for us. Uh, and as a coach, I akin it to kind of watching tape, watching previous football games and learning what you can do without having to go through the hardship. You know, Mark has had to go through the hardship so that hopefully we can learn from him as well and his experience, and not have to go through that, and be inspired and encouraged to do that. So I hope you've learned as much as I did. I appreciate you all listening and subscribing, and I'll catch you on the next one. So bye for now.